Boardroom Bound, Episode 49, How Women Can Change the Way We Approach the Boardroom, with Gloria Feldt.
Isn't it better for you to choose how you want the world to see you versus just responding to how people do describe you? You want to be the CEO of your own life, basically. And once you can do that, then I think everything else flows much more easily.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give new and aspiring directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's show, we're speaking with Gloria Feldt. She is a gender parity expert and someone who has been actively promoting women advancing in their careers all the way up to the boardroom, which ties in with what we do. So her organization, Take the Lead, is all about empowering, coaching, guiding women to be able to take that next step in their career. Clearly a big part of what we're doing today. Many of our audience are aspiring directors. They are someone who is aiming to move up and reach that top level. And there are national organizations like 2020 Women on Boards that I'm proud to be part of the steering committee of. They were working hard to also achieve this goal. So we're going to hear some great insights from Gloria about how she empowers people to take that next step in their career. And this works for our audience, whether you're male or female. All of these ideas will apply to you. So I'm very excited to share that information with you today, and let's jump into the show. Gloria Feldt, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Thank you, Alexander. I am thrilled to be with you today.
Well, this is a topical conversation because we talk a lot on this show about the need for what I call diversity of thought in a boardroom. It works in so many different dimensions. Some people just think gender. Other people think economic background. I'm extremely tall. We could talk height, but certainly international perspective. Like, there's so many different ways it can go in, but you are a specialist in the gender perspective and very clear, and I believe in it, that we need more females on boards and the value they bring. We've had so many amazing ones on this show that have just proven they are great board members. And I would love to talk, maybe we just start out today about your Take the Lead organization, how it came about, what you do, and then we'll go off onto the topic from there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alexander. Take the Lead publicly launched in 2014 after about a year's worth of research and developing materials and products and things like that. And it started somewhat unintentionally, even though I teach women about having high levels of intentionality as one of the most important things that we can do, including having the intention to serve on boards. Mm-hmm. So it's rather odd that I would say Take the Lead started somewhat unintentionally, but it all started when I wrote my last book, which is called No Excuses, 9 Ways Women Can Change How We Think About Power. I wrote that book after I discovered that despite the fact that women like me, I'm a second wave feminist, women like me had been opening doors and changing laws for decades, and yet even though we had opened those doors and we had changed the laws, the fact was that women had been stalled at under 20% of the top leadership positions in every single sector. Every single sector. So it didn't matter whether you were talking about the Fortune 500 companies or whether you were talking about large nonprofit organizations. Women were stuck at under 20% of the top positions, and I could not believe it. I was shocked. And so I did an analysis. I did my own research. There were studies that said women have less ambition than men. I said, cannot be true. And my conclusion was that women have been socialized to have a different and somewhat ambivalent relationship with power than men. And the result of that is that we stand back and we don't necessarily put our hands up. We do the work, but we don't necessarily take the credit. We may have ambitions, but we don't necessarily know from the get-go that we bring to the table the absolute value that is needed in order to achieve those ambitions. And so I wrote this book. It was intended to be a social commentary book, but I'm a practical activist, basically, And in every chapter, I put, well, this is part of the problem, and this is what you do about it. And every chapter has what I called power tools in it that were just tips and immediately actionable ways that women could advance themselves. Well, it didn't take long before people started asking me to do workshops using this book. And when I did the workshops, I saw women have tremendous breakthroughs in their levels of comfort with power, their levels of intentionality, their ability to see themselves as something more than they might have, and their willingness to take action to get those higher level positions. So I was hooked. And before I knew it, with a co-founder, it became the organization Take the Lead. And now we have training, we have mentoring and coaching and community building, we have role model programs, and we have thought leadership to help us shift the narratives in our own heads from problem focus to solution focus. And we have programs that are anywhere from short workshops to 3-month-long immersive, full-out programs that really help give women the most amazing breakthroughs in their careers. So it's been great fun, and I'm thrilled with where we are today, and we're just ready to scale up and serve more people.
I think I've experienced what you're talking about, and I can encapsulate for our audience. So you talked about maybe women not putting their hands up. Here's the way I've seen it play out in my career. My first dozen years were as a strategy consultant. And I remember one of the partners in the firm explained to me one day, he said, we have a gender problem. So what do you mean? He said, well, every woman that we think is ready for promotion at whatever level, we go to her and we say, Betty, Sue, whatever your name is, we think you're ready. And the woman will usually go, no, not yet. I need another year or two. The opposite is true for the men. The men will come a year or two early and say, partner X, I am ready to be promoted. And partner's like, well, I don't think you are yet. And they go, no, I am. I want you to promote me. And I don't know if it's men are taught to be more aggressive or more assertive, whatever we want to describe it as. Does that seem to fit with the story that you're telling?
It's absolutely a perfect fit with the story, Alexander. And I will give you an example. When I started, I particularly noticed that women hadn't made it to parity in Congress, and that was what started me off on this quest. And so I interviewed the heads of about a dozen organizations that help women run for office. Now, there were Democrat, Republican, nonpartisan, women over 40, women under 40, you name it. There are all kinds of organizations. They spend millions of dollars every year, and they were barely moving the dial. Now, do you know any organizations that are specifically created to help men run for office?
I don't think we need them, do we?
They kind of don't need to. That's right. And so when I interviewed the heads of all these organizations that help women run for office, it was like they were reading from a script. And they would say, a man will get up in the morning, he'll look at himself in the mirror, and he'll say, I believe I'll run for Senate. And he will not question whether he's qualified. He will not question whether he's entitled. If he wants to do it, he'll just do it. And generally, it's for the power and the glory of it. A woman may say that she's interested in politics, and she'll say, well, but first I better learn something. First I should take some courses. First I should work in some campaigns so I know what I'm doing before I run. And by the time she runs, if she ever does run, because women at that time, now this has changed. I'm going to say there are big changes, and I hope we talk about that. But at that time when I was doing this research, which is now about 10 years ago, women were about half as likely as men ever to even think about running for office. But by the time they would run, the man was already the incumbent, and it was very difficult to beat an incumbent. So I was like, what in the world is going on? And that was when I started delving into these fine, sometimes imperceptible, almost imperceptible messages that we get that are gendered in our culture, and that really do tell us what we should do and what we should be. And we do that because we get treated better when we abide by our gender stereotypes. And that's a big part of the problem. So we have to get women to say the heck with the gender stereotype. I want to do this, and I'm just going to do it.
It's interesting because we've had some phenomenally successful female directors on our show. Cheryl Batchelder comes to mind, for example, and she talks about the amazing opportunity that came up for her, what that was literally called a starter board, working for True Value, and it was a private company, and how she's being mentored and coached, which is, of course, way before the early days of things like the 2020 Women on Board movement, which, I'm thrilled to be part of the steering committee for the national conversation happening on November 21st. You got cities all around the country coming together talking about what do we need to prepare women? How do we get them the right contacts? And it's wonderful that as a nation, and frankly, we want it to be the worldwide phenomenon, but that we can be thinking about how do we do this? And there's so many great organizations all chipping away at this problem together. And clearly, 2020 Women on Board has a branding problem now because we're almost at 2020, but forget about that. So this is a great organization doing lots of great stuff. And we find other ones like yourself who are working not just in a boardroom, but moving people, I'm going to call it up their career path and target. So maybe we can peel back this onion a bit and say there are probably different conversations that you're having because your target audience is probably some people early in their career, mid-career, and also executive levels. And as we think about the goal of increasing board diversity, getting more women on boards, do you have different conversations at people at the different levels, or is it always the same guidance?
It's interesting because the core curriculum, the core program stays the same. But it obviously has to be adapted and customized to either the sector that we're working with, the company that we're working with, or the level of employee that we're working with. I also teach it as an academic course. And every time I do, I think, well, I'm going to have mostly young students, and they're going to think a lot of what I'm talking about is passé because these young women have always been told they can do anything they want to do and be anything they want to be. But what I find is that those same insecurities, the lack of confidence, the lack of assertiveness about what they want to do with their lives, they're still looking for that. I guess I would call it mentorship in a way, and role models so that they feel comfortable. Now, here's the thing that I teach them first and foremost, which is this. You have everything you need. You actually do already have the power. You don't need to look for it outside of yourself. We know that women are earning 57% of the college degrees now and have been for about 2 decades, so we are prepared. We know that companies that have more women in their upper leadership, including on their boards of directors, make more money, substantially more money. So the business case is there. That we didn't have that 20 years ago, but now we have the business case. We know that women buy 80 to 85% of the consumer goods and products that are sold. So any company that wants to be successful, the women are your market. You need to be marketing. Women have the power of the purse. They have the power of the purse. So we have all of these things in addition to the fact that it's just plain just and it's the right thing to do to give every human being the opportunity to have a fair and equal share of everything life has to offer, including leadership roles. And so once we look at those statistics, and I am able to show women with data that we already have everything we need. The only thing that's lacking is we need to own that, we need to embrace our power, and we need to change how we think about power, which is why I have the title of the book, How We Change, How Women Can Change How We Think About Power. It's that we need to shift from the narrative we have been given that has framed our culture, which is largely a framing of power as being a scarcity, a finite pie. If I take a piece, there's less for you. When the truth is that power is an infinite resource and it has no characteristics of its own. It's about what you do with it. So when I can get women to shift their thinking about power from really an oppressive idea of it being the power over them, since we've borne the brunt of some really negative aspects of power over a few millennia, to the innovative and creative and expansive and exciting power to create, to innovate, to make life better for our families, our communities, the world, well, I would just see their faces relax. And they would say, well, I want that. Well, of course you do. And women are good at making more pies. We know there's no finite pie. You can always make more. You can always make more. So that's what I think we have to do. We have to shift how we think about power, and that is the real breakthrough for women. And then once we do that, we give them the 9 leadership power tools so they have immediately actionable skills that they can use. And then if they're in the full-blown program, we actually have them make a strategic plan for themselves, and then we follow up to see if they're doing it.
So I would agree on the abundance mentality, right? I don't think that we can say that clear enough, right? Think about organizations that can grow and develop and become bigger and stronger and more financially successful. So I mirror that. And I would love to just take this conversation to maybe a little bit more granular level of detail for our conversation piece for people at different stages of their career. So for example, let's take someone who's an executive. Let's pretend you have a women full of C-level executives who are thinking, great, I just need to figure out how to break through and get that first board role. What are the actionable steps that people in our audience would do to make that happen?
Well, there are two very simple exercises that I do with women, and one of them is called your points of power. And it's very simple. It starts by being clear, extremely clear, about what are the highest value levels that you bring to the table for the role you wish to have. You know, what is it that you have? Is it your level of education? Is it your experience in that industry? Is it your ability to read a P&L? What is it that you bring to that will qualify you? And research that and make sure that you know exactly what your points of power are and that you're comfortable with them and you're comfortable articulating them. So that's one thing. But I truly believe the world turns on human connections. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that in a cynical, it's not what you know, it's who you know kind of way that people say. I mean that in a real, true relationship building way. And so the second exercise that I give women is called your power map. And literally, you should draw a map of where the other people's points of power are in your life, who are in the sphere that you want to succeed in. And who, I love Carla Harris at Morgan Stanley has this wonderful phrase. She says, who's going to carry the paper for you when you're not in the room? Mm-hmm. Identify what relationships you have that can help you get where you want to go. Identify who you need to build relationships with, and it's not necessarily your superiors. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's some external third party who is an influencer who can speak on your behalf. Sometimes it's somebody who works for you or with you who you want to make sure that you build that relationship so that if they're asked about you, they're going to say great things about you. So it's all about being very intentional about making sure that you are building relationships at all levels of your organization or at all levels of the organizations on whose board you want to serve.
That makes sense. I'm reminded of that Jeff Bezos quote about your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Yeah. And what you're talking about is you need brand champions so that when you're not in the room, they're representing that brand for you in the right way, in the right conversations. Because, I've worked at JP Morgan in the past. Jamie Dimon was the CEO. If Jamie Dimon really respected some of his C-suite executives they wanted to be on a board, he could call a million different firms and probably put them into a final round opportunity right away. And not that we can all have that direct sort of access, but it's the same way as we talk about, you might be working with someone earlier in a career or mid-career who thinks they want to be in a board level. You are building your networking reputation as you grow and develop throughout your career. Those are people who can be of influence and take your message out to the world with you. So I guess I would think partly it's making people aware that you want it because you've got to be able to put your hand up, but then giving them the right message perhaps to share on your behalf. Do you agree?
That's exactly right. And there were two parts that you said that I want to concur with. And the first is letting people know what you want, because nobody is clairvoyant. Don't expect that just because you do good work, somebody's going to see that and speak for you. It might happen, but I would not leave it to chance. And that's one of the hard lessons I had to learn myself, because like many women, I assumed that it was all about my just doing a good job. And I'll never forget a man who gave me one of the best pieces of advice I ever had, which was ask for it by name. Ask for it by name. Say what you want, say what you need, and don't be afraid to do that. But the second part of what you said was to be cognizant of who the people are who can then speak for you. And I want to say, I think it's also very important for what you want them to say about you to be authentic. Mm-hmm. If what your skill set is in, say, technology, and you don't expect somebody to advocate for you to be on a dance team, a dance studio. You make sure that the way you're asking people to speak for you and about you is really authentic, and that they can do so in a way that is true, and it's with integrity. It needs to be with integrity.
And I think the reality is that for anyone, no matter what gender you are, as you are thinking about positioning yourself for success, there's luck, but the reality is luck and preparation can meet after a lot of hard work, and then you're ready for that right opportunity. So if you're doing all the right things, but sort of toiling away where no one can see it, and maybe you're not putting hand up to be on a platform on a stage and speak, or you're not sharing your views with the world, social media is amazing that way. You can put your expertise out there. You really have to take steps to put yourself out there literally in order, and sometimes take a little bit of a risk. Is that part of giving people the courage just to go out there and try things?
Well, yes, it is part of giving people the courage. You said it really, I think you hit on something that not everybody realizes today, which is that everybody is the media. Everybody can be a thought leader, and that you don't have to do too many different things, but if you're not making yourself known, at least to some extent, choose at least one platform of social media that you become known on, that you build a good following on, and either get yourself interviewed, or if you're a writer, like to write an article now and again that really expresses your point of view and backs it up with solid facts, and you can become an expert. You can show your expertise in that way. You don't have to wait for the New York Times to call you anymore. You really don't. You are the medium, and you are the media. And one of my favorite power tools that I do work with women on is to define your own terms first before someone else defines you, because we're all going to be defined. And isn't it better for you to choose how you want the world to see you versus just responding to how people do describe you? You want to be the CEO of your own life, basically. No matter if you're never the CEO of your company, and whether you do or don't serve on a corporate board, you want to be the CEO of your own life. And once you can do that, then I think everything else flows much more easily.
I think that's great advice. And I would sort of paraphrase that a bit about everyone's got to have a life plan. You got to have some clear goals and structures. You know what you're marching to and taking it forward. And I also love what you said, that we are all the media. We're all the medium today about how you can go out there and use the tools that are at your disposal. For example, we're talking on a podcast heard all around the world. The world's incredible today. The technology of a supercomputer in your phone, that's your smartphone. And podcast is incredible. There are over 700,000 of these global. And I know that you launched one recently as well. So Take the Lead Women is a show. You've had some great speakers. Gloria Steinem was one of your guests recently, right? So you've had some incredibly powerful people talking about this issue. I would love to hear about what your experience has been like and the receptivity you had to it.
Well, the podcast, thank you so much for asking me that question, first of all. The podcast, it came about in part because I've been doing a monthly, what we call our virtual happy hour now for almost 5 years. And that is a live webcast. So it's visual as well as the audio once a month, in which I interview impressive, exciting, interesting women. And I definitely want to interview some of the women that you've mentioned, who you've talked about, who are on boards, because they sound absolutely fabulous. That's the kind of woman, the kind of role model woman, and we've had a few men too, who we've had on our virtual happy hour. Well, I realized not too long ago that podcasts had become so popular, and they're so easy for people to download and listen to at odd times, that we had 5 years worth of content that we could repurpose and provide that content to people. And so we're repurposing the ones that we've done over the last 5 years and doing one of those a month. Then we have a new one every month that we do. For example, we'll be doing one on mental health. We just did one on women and finance, how to build your wealth. We've done them for entrepreneurs. We touch on a wide range of issues, but most importantly, we want women to see what they can be by virtue of the people that I'm interviewing. So we'll have 2 podcasts a month that are exciting, fabulous role model women that people want to know and can listen to and find out about them. Then we will have the other 2 weeks every month, Gloria, that's me, I get to just pontificate. I get to just talk for a few minutes about some leadership lesson that I've learned in my experience. And that is so much fun. I am enjoying that no end, and I'm getting really great response to it. So people can pick and choose amongst the interesting women they want to learn about, and if they're trying to solve some leadership problem for themselves, maybe I've talked about it, and they can find that just exactly what they need on my mini podcasts. And also, if people have a question they want me to speak to address, I'd love for them to tweet it to me at Gloria Feldt or at Take Lead Women, either one. I'll get it, and I would love to use that, and I'll give them a big shout out and use their question as the kind of tipping off point for my podcast.
Well, I was actually just going to go there because I know you and I were joking that you, as you describe it, not me, that you spend way too much time on social media. And I'm sure that some of the people from today's show would love to know how best to connect with you. And so you just gave us a little bit for the Twitter handle. What were the other social media that you think people would be looking for you on?
If people want to find me, all they need to do is remember that my last name is spelled Feldt with a D that doesn't make a sound when you say it. So if I tried to have a handle that wasn't just my name, I'd never remember what it was. So you can find me on every social platform at Gloria Feldt. Take the Lead is at Take Lead Women on Twitter and Instagram. And on Facebook and LinkedIn, because we can have more letters, we can have our full name, it is Take the Lead Women. So we love to hear from people. We love to respond to what people are interested in, what you want us to talk about, and love to interact with folks. And yes, I do spend way too much time on social media. It's really annoying to myself, but what can I do? That's just me.
Well, Gloria, we were delighted to have you on the show today. Thank you for sharing your insights and helping all of us to be more boardroom bound.
Thank you, Alexander. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Gloria Feldt. She's got some fantastic experience from all of her years about helping people understand how to take that next step in their career, especially for females to realize what you need to do to put your hand up, have your name be known out there so you can ask for it by name, because you want to be able to define your terms before someone else defines you, basically becoming the CEO of your life. And if your goal is to get that board role, how do you go about do that? Excellent tips for today. Now, if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you can get links to everything that we talked about in today's episode. And the most important thing I want to leave you with today is just to remember that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content we're bringing to you every Wednesday. And thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.